Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, coming off of a really disappointing loss on Sunday to Miami, there's still a lot of positivity that we can glean from the Timberwolves' first 10 games. I'll talk about why we shouldn't be so down after one disappointing loss. There's things that are going well for the Wolves. We'll also preview the NBA Cup. The Wolves play their first NBA Cup game on Tuesday. We'll look at the new the new Wolves Nike City Edition jerseys as well. It's all coming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start your season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You can start it with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Happy Timberwolves game day. The Wolves are back in action. They're back on the West Coast for the first of two consecutive games in Portland, a weird schedule quirk. The first game is an NBA Cup game. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then Wednesday night is not just a regular game. And of course, NBA Cup games count as a regular game, and then also toward the NBA Cup tournament as well. So we'll talk a bit about that. We'll talk about the Wolves group later. I want to get into quickly talk about the City Edition jerseys that were released on Monday. But I want to spend the bulk of the show today talking about why the sky is not falling. And I know we're 10 games in. The Wolves are above 500. But like the Sunday loss was so bad. And hopefully you listen to Monday's show. But I was, I think, fair and critical of Chris Finch and the players involved in the collapse, which is basically everybody. But like, that's one game. Overall through 10, the Wolves are doing okay 10% of the way through the schedule. So I'll explain why I feel that way here in a moment. First, though, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. You can watch on YouTube. You can also listen wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder about the new daily newsletter. You can sign up on LockedOnDaily.com for a one-stop ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox every morning. Again, LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. All right. Let's dive in. So coming off of Sunday, disappointing loss. No two ways about it. I was very critical on Monday's show. And I called it like it was. I thought the substitution patterns were bad. I thought the way the final possession of the inbound play was mismanaged. The Rudy Gobert subbing him out prior to Miami's last offensive possession was mismanaged. And I thought everybody, especially Mike Conley and Anthony Edwards, had really poor closes to that game. All of that aside, you wake up on Monday morning and this Minnesota Timberwolves team is a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. It's hard to ask for a whole lot more than that. The Timberwolves are 6-4, obviously above 500. Their Pythagorean win total is 7-3, meaning given their point differential, they should be a game better than they are. It's essentially what that means. So their expected win-loss of 7-3 would be the sixth best in the league. The Sunday loss should have been a win. And while the collapse matters, and we could talk about that in a vacuum, other than some like broader issues that we'll talk about here in a minute, that game wasn't necessarily like a symptom of a broader problem. There's a couple of symptoms within the game that caused the problem of the bad loss, but it's not like this is some sort of overarching worrying trend of them blowing games late. Like if you look at the 10 games so far. So assuming, like, say they held on Sunday, and everybody's feeling a lot different about this Wolves team. 4 wins in a row, 7-3, the whole thing, right? This is still, according to Cleaning the Glass, the 9th best offense in the league by offensive rating and the 10th best defense in the league by offensive rating. Yes, we expected this defense to be much better. We're also only 10 games in. The offense is certainly better than what I think anybody expected it to be at this stage, given that it languished around the 20th best offense for much of last season before settling in the 16-17 range on the season. And look, I just hope that this would be a top 3 defense and a top 12 offense. And, you know, I'd love it if the Wolves finish there. Now, the upside for this offense is certainly higher than 12th, but like jumping from 17th to the top 10 feels like it would be really tough. Right now, they're sitting 9th. So like there's improvement to be had still. But virtually every contender is going to have a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense. They might not be top 3 in both categories. But if you're top 10 in both categories, you are a contender. Full stop. The only other teams that that's true for are all real contenders. Oklahoma City is, of course, first in both categories, even now that they've lost a couple of games, obviously, without Chet Holmgren now for a period of time. Golden State's top 10 in both categories. Memphis is, I think the best case of Memphis is certainly a contender. I said that from the start. Cleveland, Dallas, Houston, Boston, and Minnesota. Those are the only teams that are top 10 in both categories. What was that? 7 teams I think I listed. And the only teams that are really surprises would be Boston, possibly Memphis. Teams that are in the top 10 in one and not the other, the Clippers in Orlando and Phoenix. Well, actually, Phoenix isn't top 10 in anything in either category. And then the Knicks are a top 10 offense, but a bottom 10 defense. So being top 10 in both through 10% of the schedule is not bad. A 6-4 record with a positive point differential and a Pythagorean record that suggests that they should be 7-3 is positive. If you go through Basketball Reference and you look at some of the different things, or cleaning the glass, like the peripherals are all really good. Like the Wolves are actually about where we thought they'd be in a lot of different categories. They're shooting threes like they were last year. Their 3-point rate is 3rd best in the league. Their attempts per game is 4th. Their percentage is 5th. Now they finished last season 1st in percentage. So sure, it'd be good if that continued to move upward. As I said last week on the show, on one of the shows last week, I think it was Wednesday, Mike Conley and Dante DiVincenzo are shooting well below career averages. I think those are going to improve. They haven't yet. Even just as recently as Conley had an abysmal game on Sunday, but both of those guys are likely to shoot better. Now is Julius Randle, Anthony Edwards, Alexander Walker is not going to shoot 50% from 3 all year. Like those guys aren't all going to be above 40% when it's all said and done. But I think Conley and DiVincenzo will be in the neighborhood of 40%. And their volume is still higher than everybody I just mentioned, except for Ant, in terms of attempts per game or 3-point rate or however you want to measure it. So I think this team being top 5 in attempts and percentage is completely feasible. That's a really positive thing. The free throw rate is lower than it should be. That's the one area where there'd be some concern, and maybe I'll get back to that here in a minute. And concerns maybe a strong, well, no, it's not really. I mean, because of the way this offense has operated so far, I do think they're going to, hopefully they shoot more free throws. I think they'll shoot a better percentage. Percentage-wise, they're still only 15th, and that's with Anthony Edwards he was a little bit better the last couple games, but he's still only 67% from the free throw line, which is 10 points lower than his worst seasons and 15 plus points lower than what he was last year, I think. So the percentage and the rate need to come up. I think the percentage will. The rate is the one thing I would flag as hey, I thought this wouldn't be a problem, and now I'm kind of thinking maybe it is. They're, according to Cleaning the Glass, they're 19th in free throw rate so far this season. Last season, come on, Cleaning the Glass, load faster. Last season, the Timberwolves were 8th in free throw rate as a team. Okay, this year they're, 23rd? That has to improve. That's the one area that I would flag and say, look, this has to be better. The other area they've struggled in at times offensively that I expected them to struggle in is turnover rate. And, they replaced their most turnover-prone player last year in terms of turnover rate was Kyle Anderson. Karl Anthony Towns didn't help with that issue, and yet they're still turning the ball over at an alarming clip this season. They are 26th in turnover rate on Basketball Reference. I think they're a little better than that on, they're 24th on Cleaning the Glass. That's got to improve. And you've got guys like Rudy Gobert's turnover rate is much higher. The Wolves have been kind of force-feeding him a little bit at times. I think for the most part, it's been okay. Alexander Walker has a much higher turnover rate than you'd expect. DiVincenzo, Julius Randle has had a couple of rough games in that category. Go on down the list. Actually, Mike Conley's worse than you'd expect. Pretty much everyone except for Jaden, Naz, and Ant are turning the ball over far too much. Ant's not turning the ball over because he's just shooting threes. That's really the whole thing. And that's improved, by the way. He turned it over too much early in the season, and it's gotten a little bit better here recently. I think that would be the one area where they struggled last year, and they're still struggling. But because they're shooting so many more threes, they've kind of papered over some of that. It's still something that they could improve, but the offense is good despite that problem. The free throw rate thing, there's got to be a world in which they can shoot threes and get to the free throw line. That's the world I want to live in. I think that's doable. I think that they could get to the line a bit more while not necessarily cannibalizing the 3-point attempt rate. And that to me is an adjustment that could be made. But again, lots of positivity here. I want to hit a couple more numbers, then we'll get into the NBA Cup / Portland talk, and then we'll close with the City Edition jerseys. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Say goodbye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower than 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. All right. So we talked about how the turnover rate isn't necessarily unexpected. The free throw rate's lower than it should be. The 3-point percentage is where it should be. All of that makes sense to me. And again, 10 games in, I mentioned the free throw shooting. I mentioned Conley and DiVincenzo will eventually shoot better from 3. And combined, like between the two of them, they're not going to play less. There's a chance Conley's minutes dwindle a bit down the road. Perhaps eventually he comes off the bench. Like those things are all possibilities. But between the two of them, their combined minutes aren't going to go down. And those dudes are the, take this team last year minus Cat. Those two would, let me rephrase this. Based on what Conley and DiVincenzo did last season for the Wolves and for the Knicks respectively, those are the best 3-point shooters on the Wolves. I know Ant is just unbelievable so far this year, Miami game notwithstanding, but like the track record suggests Conley and DiVincenzo should be the best shooters. So the reason this start is so frustrating is A, recency bias, because we all feel this way following Sunday's game, but because of the winnable games. And Sunday's the very best example of that. The Lakers game, they played terrible. Those happen. It wasn't like an alarming collapse. They just didn't play well. It was first game of the year. The Dallas game was winnable. Dallas is really good. You're going to lose to good teams. San Antonio was a schedule loss. Also a winnable game. Like, of those 3, you're going to have a stinker every now and again. So it's frustrating that it happened on opening night against the Lakers. But fine, that's a loss. The Dallas loss, they're a good team. The Spurs loss, you'd love to have back. The Miami loss, you'd love to have back. So, like, I don't know, 8-2 through 10 games sounds good. 7-3 is realistically where they should be. The sky isn't falling because of one loss where a really good coach made some mistakes and some really good players, Anthony Edwards and Mike Conley and everybody else, had some bad play down the stretch. The overall first 10 games, 6-4. I don't remember exactly what I said when the schedule came out. I think I probably was in the 7-3 range, maybe 8-2 on this. But like, I don't know, like the next week doesn't look too bad. Back-to-back games in Portland's tough, but at least it's one of the league's worst teams. You should beat them twice. They beat them by 25 last Friday. Then you get Sacramento back home for a matinee against Phoenix on Sunday. Is tough just for like the one game at home. But then they get 3 days off next week before they have a tough road trip with at Toronto, at Boston, and then back home for a longer homestand the week of Thanksgiving. So I don't know. I don't feel too doomsday about this for all the reasons I just listed. And individual play-wise, like obviously we've seen Ant be incredible. Naz Reid's been awesome ever since opening night. Like I think if I remember right, he played terribly against the Lakers and he's been amazing since then. Rudy's been very good. He's been impactful offensively. He's been impactful defensively as always. Julius Randle's been good. And the bench has been overall incredible. Naz, and DiVincenzo's been very good when he's gotten the opportunity too. I think it's the Mike Conley play. It's the spotty Jaden McDaniels play. Those are probably the biggest issues if you want to look at individual, performances to this point. But I'll say this for the third or fourth time on the show today. The sky's not falling. Think if they hold on against Miami. Think if Jovic doesn't hit that layup. And I know that that's not how this works, but one play goes a different way, and this is a very different feel going into this road trip with a 4-game winning streak and a 7-3 record. Okay, let's talk the Portland game and let's talk NBA Cup here really quickly. So a reminder about the NBA Cup: the group the Timberwolves are in is actually probably the worst group, or a different way of saying that would be the easiest group in the entire NBA. I mean, there's no other teams in their group that you would look at before the season and say, oh, yeah, that's a top 4 team in the conference. I know Houston's been really good. Sacramento's tough, and the Clippers can be. But those are the only other, it's the Wolves, the Rockets, the Kings, the Clippers, and the Blazers. Every other group has 2 teams that you'd say, it could be a top 4 team in the conference. Group B is the Thunder, and they've got Phoenix, who, I would have had maybe 5th or 6th in the conference, but they're in that conversation. Plus, you've got the Lakers, and then the Spurs with Wemby, and then the Jazz, who've been the worst team in the league. Group C, you get Golden State, Denver, and Dallas all in the same group. And you have Memphis and New Orleans. New Orleans is nothing what they should be, nothing near what they should be. And Memphis has been better than expected, but that's just a gauntlet. And then you even look at the East, and it's kind of the same deal. Probably the next weakest group is the group with Miami, Milwaukee, and the Pacers. They also have the Raptors and Pistons. Next to the Wolves group, that's maybe the next weakest. Group that was Group B in the East. Group C is the Celtics and Cavs, and then they have 3 horrible teams with the Bulls, Hawks, and Wizards, but Celtics and Cavs in the same group is rough. And then the other East group is Sixers, Knicks, and Magic. Obviously, Banchero's out. The Knicks haven't been with, and the Sixers are the Sixers. But again, that's a bit more daunting than what the Wolves have. Now, I say that, and of course, they now have 2 straight games against Portland. The first game is the NBA Cup game, so important. And then Friday, the Wolves are in Sacramento, where they've already played and won once. They won by a bucket in their second game of the season back on October 24th. So the second at Sacramento game, and it is a cup game. Remember, last year, the Wolves won their first cup game and then lost to Sacramento and ultimately didn't even make the knockout round. So we'll see how hungry Sacramento is for this one. But the group is very winnable. The Wolves are clearly the favorites out of that group of teams. There's really no reason why they shouldn't win the group. I'm still a bit conflicted. This is year 2 of it in terms of the merits of really busting it to win this thing. I mean, I think because the games count toward your NBA schedule, just approach it the same way. I wouldn't necessarily put any additional weight on Tuesday's game versus Wednesday's. And I would imagine in an honest moment, either would Chris Finch and the Timberwolves coaching staff, front office, and even players. But, I guess maybe the players winning a little bit of extra cash, and I guess the coaches too, if they win. But still, overall, treating it like a regular season game, which is important, makes sense to me. But I don't know if you're valuing Tuesday or Wednesday's game. They're in the same arena with slightly different courts from Tuesday to Wednesday against the exact same opponent. So anyway, all right, next I want to look at that matchup specifically quickly because the Wolves just played Portland Friday, but we didn't do a post-game pod after that game. So just a quick refresher on what happened and why this is a very winnable matchup for the Wolves. And we'll talk a little bit about the City Edition jerseys next as well. All that is upcoming. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more in the same place where you place your bets. The Wolves-Blazers game on Tuesday, as of right now, the Wolves are favored by 8.5 points. That line actually went up despite the Wolves lost Sunday. I think it was 7.5 when I looked the other day. It's now 8.5. Wolves favored by 8.5 at Portland at 9:00 on Tuesday night. First game of the NBA Cup. And we'll talk about that matchup here in a minute. But go check that out on FanDuel. Of course, Monday Night Football last night. You got all kinds of NBA with the Cup starting on Tuesday. You've got lots of games this week that have some of these additional implications, additional layers to them. So go check that out on FanDuel. Again, you can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. So the Wolves took on the Blazers last Friday, a non-cup game, of course. And that was the Ant Goes Nuts game where he had 9 threes, scored 37 points. The Wolves got up huge early. They led by 18 at the end of the first quarter. Overall in this game, the Timberwolves' biggest lead was close to 30. It was 28. Yeah, it was their biggest lead in the game. And then, again, 18 at the end of the first quarter. It was 13 at halftime, but then it was back up to 23 at the start of the fourth. And there were a couple of moments in the middle of the game, really the second quarter, where the Wolves let the Blazers back into things a little bit, but it never at all got dicey. Nobody on the Blazers scored more than 16 points. Scoot Henderson played 32 minutes off the bench and had 16, but the Wolves did a good job of limiting anybody else. Like Anthony Simons had 14, but it took him 16 shots to do it. They did a really good job on him. And on the Wolves side of things, again, it was all about Ant. Julius Randle played extremely well. Also, Rudy was fantastic, 8 and 15 plus 3 blocks and 405 shooting. It was Lob City Midwest, if you will, for Rudy Gobert on Friday night. Nas was, other than Ant, was maybe the best player on the floor, had 15 points on 6 of 11 shooting, 3 threes, and lots of great garbage time there. We saw Rob Dillingham get to score 7 points in 6 minutes of garbage time too. And it's just a the Blazers started 3-5 or something, and 3-6 maybe, and they're just not they're not that good. By me saying they're not even 3-7 good, like they really should be worse than even the Jazz this season. And I think we're starting to see that come through. They were 6 of 25 outside the arc. The Wolves made 16 more 3-pointers than Portland on Friday. And they out-rebounded them by 12. They out-assisted them 32-13. Somehow the Wolves still turned it over more than Portland in this game, but didn't get killed in the fast break. In fact, they had more fast break points than Portland. This was another game where Portland actually had more paint points. I think that was more due to the chasm between the two teams for much of the game. I wouldn't read too much into that necessarily, but certainly a good matchup for Minnesota. As I always say, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a span of 5 days. It's hard to win 2 games on a back-to-back, or to sweep a back-to-back. It's hard to sweep a back-to-back against the exact same team. It's not an easy thing to do. Portland is now just 3-8, though. They were 3-6 when they came to Minnesota on Friday. So obviously a game the Wolves should win. Again, favored by 8.5 points, as I mentioned on FanDuel. As of right now, the Wolves actually have the 4th best. Is that right? The 4th best point differential in the Western Conference. So if you just glance at the standings, you go, they're in 8th. Depending on where you look. Well, them and 4 other teams are 6-4. They've got a better point differential than all the other 6-4 teams. The only teams with better differentials are the Thunder, the Warriors, and Memphis, who's 7-4. It is better than Phoenix, who's won some close games, and now Durant's hurt. I think this is an opportunity for Minnesota to win a few games here, jump a few of these teams, and get back into that Thunder, Warriors, Nuggets, Wolves kind of tier at the top of the West. I think that's still where we're headed. I think with the injury to Durant, Phoenix will slide a bit. The Thunder may slide a bit too without Chet, but they're still very good, and obviously still have SGA. So all that to say, a very winnable game. The keys for Minnesota are just Simons, anything Scoot Henderson's able to do off the bench, just stay in their jerseys. Don't get lazy guarding on the perimeter. Do what you need to do on the glass. DeAndre Ayton's the only guy you're really worried about there. Defend the 3-point line and don't get beat in transition. The Wolves should win both these games by double digits. They really should. I think they'll win Tuesday. I think they cover the 8.5. I would take them minus 8.5 on FanDuel. Wednesday, obviously second night of a back-to-back, anything can happen, but that's what I would do on Tuesday. I trust that the Wolves will be okay on Tuesday. All right, final thought today. Timberwolves released their NBA, and of course NBA. The Timberwolves play in the NBA. The Nike City Edition jerseys, and I actually like these. I always try to withhold real judgment till I see them on the floor, because that's when you can really tell. It's so hard on a screen. It really is. However, I really like these jerseys. I think they're going to look better than last year's, which were cool. The ice blue, that was supposed to be the summertime lake with I shouldn't say ice blue. They were the dark blue with the reflection. And as if you're on a lake in the summer. This is apparently part 2 of the series, is what the Wolves are calling it. And it's the, white base of the jersey instead of the blue. And then it's blue with a little bit of black outline and some black, I think, up near the neck. Great detail on the shorts, which are mostly white. There's a little bit of both a light and a dark blue on like the left leg of the shorts. And then the Timberwolves logo, the logo with the basketball in the background, the primary, I believe it is, has a bit of an icy hue to it as well. And then there's a white on white Timberwolves. I think it's a Howling Wolf, if I remember right. I'm gonna see if I can find it on like the belt area. Oh no, it's not. It's it's just the state of Minnesota on the belt area. Really cool. A lot of land of 10,000 lakes, white on white on the piping kind of area. I think they did a great job with these. And again, I'm very excited to see them on the floor. They do have a court that goes along with it, which looks cool in the mock-ups, but especially for the court, you got to see it, on the screen, in person, on TV, something in action, we'll call it, to really have a strong opinion on it. I think maybe for a rainy day here, maybe at some point, maybe next week, where there's 4 off days in a row, we'll do like a city edition jerseys ranked. I'm pretty passionate about jerseys and branding and all of the above. I think the Wolves have had some really, really strong winners and some underrated ones too. And I think they've had some that are not great. Like I'll tell you right now, the worst ones were the first year where they had the gray, like with the wolf texture on the sides. My guess is that was a rush design type idea. And they were really trying to lean into, that was, I think, the first year, the city and association, the white and blue that they're still wearing, the Jimmy Butler year. It was kind of lazy, but there's been some great ones. And there's that, like, I have a couple of favorites that maybe rank higher. So I'm going to find a full list of them. I'm going to rank them. We'll do it at some point, hopefully next week on the show. But I think these are really nice. I really do like them. I think they're going to pop. The players seem to like them based on all the content that the Wolves put out on social media regarding them. So go check all that out if you haven't already. All right. Wolves in Portland tonight, 9 p.m. Central tip. It's an NBA Cup game, same time, same place on Wednesday, not a Cup game. And then in Sacramento on Friday night at 9 p.m. Then a matinee Sunday against Phoenix. Our next show, we'll have a show Wednesday morning, which is we'll have a show that actually publishes before the basketball party, but then also Wednesday on Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube around 9 a.m. You'll get the live Minnesota basketball party show. That will be on this feed on Wednesday evening as well, Wednesday late afternoon. So if you listen to this show in the morning on your drive or whatever, in the evening on your drive home, you'll have the Minnesota basketball party as well. And then I'll be back, of course, Thursday. So I'll have post-game pods for both Wednesday and Thursday. We'll get you ready for Sacramento Friday. We'll kind of relive that first Kings game of the season from back in October. So a packed week, and then we'll take a little bit of a breath next week as we get ready, have that 3-day gap in there when the Wolves, this is like their third quick back-to-back that they've got going on here. So anyway, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. No matter where you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV, and you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder about the new Locked On Wolves daily newsletter. It's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.